The next question is Helen on Instagram. My friend has been making her own sourdough bread, and I'm really interested in doing it as well. Is sourdough gluten-free? Do you think it is a healthier than other gluten-free bread options?
Yeah, this is a really great question, and it's a little bit nuanced. So, sourdough bread is really, I mean, it's very popular. A lot of people are making their own sourdough bread, which is basically a fermented bread. And a lot of our ancestors, this is how they consume bread. They didn't consume your typical, obviously, your typical store-bought bread, Wonder Bread, or even like a whole wheat bread. Usually, the bread they consumed, like in the Bible, was a fermented form of bread like a sourdough. And when things are fermented, particularly grains and legumes and different things like that, different vegetables, when they can be fermented, you get a lot of postbiotic nutrients, and postbiotics are produced by the bacterial fermentation, and they're very anti-inflammatory, and they really help support the overall gut immune system and help balance the gut immune system. So as far as sourdough bread goes, you're going to have good postbiotics, which is good. Now, is it gluten-free? No, it's not. So your typical bread has about 124,000 parts per million of gluten in a typical serving, which is a huge load. Sourdough, the fermentation process, brings it down roughly to about 200 to 250 parts per million. So huge reduction overall in gluten. For when we're talking about gluten-free, the FDA says it needs to be less than 20 parts per million. So let's go back to those numbers. 124,000 parts per million of gluten in a typical serving of, whole wheat bread or something along those lines, brought down to 200. So huge reduction, but still higher than the 20 parts per million. And then the gluten-free certification organization actually wants it under 10 parts per million, because they're looking out for people with celiac disease, with very severe allergies to gluten. So what I would say is this. I would say that if you are healthy, you're metabolically healthy, you are no autoimmune disease that you're dealing with, overall living a healthy lifestyle, feeling good on a day-to-day basis, I think having some sourdough bread, totally fine. And I think you'll be great with that. It's much lower in gluten. To some degree, actually having a little bit of gluten like that actually is like a hormetic stressor for your body, meaning that it's a stressor that your body can adapt to and get stronger and more resilient to. However, if you were dealing with a lot of food sensitivities, if you have an autoimmune condition, if you're dealing with chronic fatigue, brain fog, you're just not feeling well, you have chronic diseases, then I would recommend avoiding it, because your body may not be able to balance and adapt to that gluten. And we know that gluten increases zonulin in our gut, which creates more laxity and more permeability in the intestinal lining, and therefore large undigested food particles, bacteria, bacterial endotoxins, and other microorganism end products will get out into the bloodstream, which will trigger more inflammation in the body. So that is really, it's very nuanced. Again, it comes back to how healthy are you as a baseline? If you're very healthy as a baseline, I think having some sourdough bread could be a wonderful addition to your diet, as long as you're doing things to keep your blood sugar stable, your immune system healthy, your gut healthy. On top of that, if you're not healthy, I would recommend more of kind of like a paleo autoimmune style diet, which is going to take out a lot of these potential triggers for inflammation. What are your thoughts there, Dr. Yvonne?
I totally agree with you. I think if you're generally healthy, you don't have GI symptoms, no brain fog, you're, pretty much symptom free. I think it's a good option because it also has benefits. The good news is that you can actually make your own gluten-free sourdough bread.
Mm.
So if you love the taste and the benefits of sourdough and you're choosing to be gluten-free, you can do that. So just look up on, YouTube. There's a lot of people that have, recipes and how to go about it. And so, yeah, I would definitely look into that.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. You can do a gluten-free sourdough. And so you can try that and see if your body responds well to that. Now, a lot of the gluten-frees are made out of like brown rice or possibly corn or something along those lines. So you may have you may have a sensitivity to those particular grains as well. Buckwheat is a common one. That's actually usually the one that most people tolerate the best. So it just kind of depends. So experiment, you kind of see how you do with it.
Yeah, and the other thing, I'm glad you mentioned that because there's actually grain-free recipes. So if you need to stay away from grains because you're sensitive, like corn and those other grains, then look up the grain-free recipes because they do exist and they're also very good, very delicious.
Wonderful.
For sure.
Wonderful.